Mind risk education are activities which seek to reduce the risk of injury from landmines or ERW, explosive remnants of war, by raising awareness of men, boys, women, and girls in accordance with their different vulnerabilities, roles, and needs, and for behavior change. Behavior change is a key component that defines what is MRE, mind risk education. MRE can be divided into 4 broad categories. One is public information campaign. The second one is education. Third is training. And fourth, community liaison. Community liaison can be defined in different ways. It depends what definition we use, but it's often about how you communicate about mine action activities with the communities before, during, or after demining operations. We believe mine risk education is a crucial area of work and is very important in humanitarian context, especially during conflict, but also after conflict. And I would mention 4 key reasons why MRE is important. First, it's a right to know that we should address for all children affected by ERW and landmines. I remember that when I started in this area of work, I remember that I met in Somaliland a young kid, a young boy who was very seriously injured by a landmine, and I had to interview him like you are interviewing me now. But he was on the bed of his hospital, and I asked the question to his mother and to the translator. I asked him what happened, and he actually found a device, and he thought that it was, he was himself a herder, and he thought that this was a camel bell. He didn't know what a landmine is. He didn't have any idea about that, and his family in the same had the same perspective. They didn't know at all what a landmine is. So I realized that all children have a right to know this kind of thing. Communities know how to deal with dangers that they have around them, such as snake bite, such falling from a tree. They have this knowledge that they always mastered. But when it comes to a new issue in their environment, such contamination of device that they don't know, then the risk is very high. And the right to know, the right to have the message you need to survive in an environment is part of the CRC, the Convention on the Right of Children. So we should respect this right. The second aspect is about the contamination itself. The contamination of ERW and landmines is often a long-term problem. Once you have a contamination, and this might take just a few hours to contaminate a region, a village, a province, or even a country. But this contamination will be there for often years or decades or even more. As we can see in Europe, we are still contaminated by ERW. A country like Afghanistan will not be cleared in the next 2, 3, or 5 years. It takes a lot of time to clear all those devices. So it's a long-term problem, and because it is a long-term problem, it should be addressed. Even this is also why we advocate for the integration of MRE within the curriculum of schools. A third reason that I would mention is the fact that children are predisposed to behavior change more than the adults are. And that is very good for their own safety, such as knowing how to prevent this type of incident and knowing what to do if they encounter such device. They can easily change their behavior, easier than adults. They are more predisposed for this. And they themselves can contribute to change the behavior of their families, of their parents, of their community. They are very powerful agents of change. So we should use or take advantage of this energy and this predisposition that children have for behavioral change. That's true for any topic, including for mind risk education. And the final point that comes across my mind, and that we already mentioned in the introduction of this webinar, and that needs to be re-emphasized, is the fact that all these incidents are preventable. All of them, without exception, are preventable. We, humanitarian actors, when we face a crisis, when we face a conflict, we have very limited leverage to prevent the conflict itself. We have very limited leverage to prevent airstrikes or to prevent the use of small arms during a conflict, or to prevent suicide bombing as it is nowadays ongoing in Nigeria plus. We have very limited leverage, or we have sometimes no leverage. But when it comes to decontamination, yes, we have a very strong leverage. Even in the middle of a conflict, we can promote mind risk education and pass on this message that can really make a difference. For example, right after a bombing of a city, in the coming hours after the bombing, it is possible to use a radio campaign that will reach the whole city. Even the day after, even within 24 hours, it is possible to reach the people affected by this airstrike to ensure that they know how to deal with this contamination. It's always something to remember. Whenever there is an airstrike or use of artillery, whatever explosive weapons, the failure rate is on average at least 10%. Depending on the type of terrain, the type of weapon used, and plenty of other factors, the failure rate remains very important, and at least 10%. This means that in any conflict situation, there is a contamination to deal with. And usually, an MRE cycle will start with a crisis. It can be a sudden contamination related to an airstrike, related to any type of conflict. And the first thing for this cycle will be to collect data. So this will be done through an assessment, through a survey. It can be a knowledge, attitude, practice survey, or it can be what we call an impact survey. It can be even a non-technical survey. That's a terminology used by in Mind Action to define a sophisticated impact survey that will determine where the risk is, where the contamination is. So that's the first step, is to assess the situation, to understand the risk. One other key dimension of this is to collect data on incidents and injuries. It's part of all what I mentioned before, but it needs to be highlighted. We need to know where the incidents are happening, who are affected by those incidents, in which areas they are affected, and in which circumstances they are affected. By using this data, we are able then to design a project. So the next step is the designing phase. And depending on the budget you have, depending on the severity of the crisis, you design a plan where you identify the message that you want to spread, that you want to disseminate. You identify with stakeholders who are the at-risk population that should be reached. and you identified which channels, which mechanisms will be used to reach those at-risk population. And there are many, many different ways. So you need to identify who will be the actors, who will be the stakeholders that will help you reach those at-risk population. This includes, for example, the teachers, or local-based organization. It includes as well the police, if appropriate. In some contexts, even the army can be involved in mind risk education. The actors are very diversified. It can include as well the religious leaders at community level, and many other possible actors. And you need to define as well the type of tools you will use, the type of approach you will use. It can be a radio campaign, or it can be the use of small media, or education through lessons in the community, lessons in the schools. So there are different ways to educate the people. So you need to identify those approach, those tools, and after that you implement your MRE project, and you define, you use an MRE mechanism to monitor the reach and the way people change their knowledge and the way they change their behavior as well. So this is the MRE component. And at the end, you can evaluate the impact of this project. That said, you need also to field test your mind risk education tools. That is very crucial. The field testing phase is very important. Mind risk education has multiple roles. I won't be able to list all the possible roles of MRE, but I will mention some of the key ones. First, it's important to clarify that MRE should be outcome-driven rather than output-driven. We tend to think that MRE is about passing on messages and making sure people get new knowledge, such as knowing how to manage the risk, such as not touching the device, not approaching it, knowing to whom we should report. This is output-driven. The knowledge change should be considered as output level. The real outcome of MRE that we are looking for is behavior change. We expect that people, the children themselves, will change their behavior. So the first role of MRE that we should highlight is that MRE should lead to reporting. And this can be measured. Once children have seen a device, they should report to adults that they have seen, that they have encountered this device, and the adults should make sure that a report will be sent to the local authorities, that they will call the police if needed. So reporting is crucial because reporting can lead to action such as making sure the security forces will remove the device, or the deminer will address the explosive ordnance disposal team will address the contamination. So this is concrete action, concrete behavior change. There is a chain of behavior change that can start from the child himself or herself. Also, when a child is informing his neighbors, his friends, when he's even educating his parents about what he learned in school or elsewhere, he or she is also changing his behavior. So this is something we are looking for. However, there are many other roles for MRE in terms, for example, of advocacy. when you organize an MRE session, it is possible to also advocate. I remember that in Afghanistan in 2000, as part of the MRE campaign, children were asked to sign a paper where they urge the government to join the Mine Ban Treaty. And this is what happened. The government of Afghanistan did join the Mine Ban Treaty, and this makes a big difference. So during an MRE session, you can also advocate for example, those treaties. And that's a key role for MRE. Or MRE contributes to open the humanitarian space, especially in a conflict situation where demining is not yet possible, where you cannot yet clear the land or survey the land. MRE can contribute to promote those mine action activities and build confidence with the local authorities and with the government, and highlight that this is an important issue that should be addressed afterwards, after the conflict is ended, when demining or EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, can be systematically deployed. There are other roles, victim assistance, for example. MRE, an MRE session, when it comes to the community, when it comes at school level, when you reach a lot of people, you in the same time can assess who in the community needs victim assistance. And you can promote victim assistance services that are in place in the country or in the region or in the district. That can be done within an MRE session. MRE also will help, and that's what we call community liaison, will help secure the way demining operations are ongoing, ensuring that marking will be respected, that the fence will be respected, that the operations of the demining operations will not be disturbed, that there will be no risk taken by the community during that time. So this is called community liaison. It can be done as a door-to-door activity, not far from the minefield or the area that is being cleared. In general, when you have a CPIE strategy, if there is a contamination in the area where the CPIE operations are ongoing, then yes, we can integrate a mine risk education component within the CPIE strategy. That's exactly what they have done in Nigeria. The International MRE Working Group was established in 2000 by International Campaign to Ban Landmines, and we have been asked to convene, to moderate this group, we as UNICEF. It's actually a large group of 250 MRE practitioners. Some are not MRE practitioners, but they have an interest on MRE. Some members are individual, some also belong to an organization, some are researchers. So it's a very diverse group from all over the world. There are about 50 countries represented in this group. And there is no hierarchy. It really promotes horizontal exchange, one. You are all welcome to participate in this group, to subscribe.